Hey guys, what's up? iPenguinPat here, and today we're going to talk about one of the topics that comes up most in conversation and that people ask me most frequently, and that is, should I go for more attack or more defense? What is the best ratio to have? And in order for us to answer that question, we have to understand how damage works in combat in Forge of Empires. If you don't understand how the damage system works, then figuring out whether you need more attack or more defense is going to be extremely difficult. Now, we all know that if you add more attack, you will do more damage, and if you add more defense, you will take less damage. But knowing exactly how the damage calculations work kind of can sometimes seem a little mystical. And I didn't actually know until I was introduced to this video from FOE Hints, which gave a rough view of how the damage works. And basically the idea is that it is a ratio, and you do damage in a range based on the ratio of the attack of the unit divided by the defense of the unit. So for example, in this chart, we would say that starting at 10 times and up, right, you will do between 9 and 10 damage. So say your unit has 1,000 attack and you are attacking a unit that has 100 defense, then you are 10 times their defense. Therefore, you are likely to hit between 9 and 10 for the damage. And that damage range goes all the way down. And then the same thing with defense. As you have a defense ratio that gets closer and closer to 0, that means that you will take less and less damage, or your enemy will take less and less damage if, say, the attrition gets really high and you're doing a lot less damage. So down in the comments, the specific ratios that FOE Hints found were listed, and this is a chart that says what those cutovers were, the tiers, so to speak. And the one thing that really stuck out to me as I looked at the tiers was that there are no tiers that have any type of resolution below this 2 to 4 range, which is at about at 0.6, and really basically everything below about a 1-to-1 ratio, there's just not much resolution. So I decided that I wanted to get a better idea. So to start with, I just kind of came up with a quick estimate of what I thought that might look like. And that's what this is here. Let me zoom in just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So this bottom part here was my rough estimate. And all I did was I basically took the damage ranges for the attack and then the ratios for the attack, and then I used the inverse for what I would assume would be the defense, so to speak. So if you are down in this very low range for damage ratio, then that would give you this estimated damage range. But I noticed that some of these numbers did not match up with my personal experience, so I started collecting data. I filled a bunch of armies in all ages for GVG, and I fought with a variety of units, and I checked the damage ranges on a ton of units. Now, I will say that the retaliation damage does not follow all of the same patterns as the regular attack damage, and I don't know why. But using this, I was able to come up with a lot of data points to get what the damage ranges seem to be, and I think it's a little bit more accurate. So here we have all of my data, and I started collecting this data, and we have well over 200 points of data. Now, one of the things that started happening is that when there are cutovers, I really wanted to have a really tight range on the cutover. And what I mean by that is that here you see that there is a range going from this 9 to 10 and 10 to 10. This is a cutover, and I really wanted to try to get this number narrowed down to be as close together as possible, because if the wider apart this number is, the less resolution we have, the less accurate we are. And here you can see going from the 9 to 9, the 9 to 10, I was able to get it down to 3/10 on the ratio. And then here, same thing, going from 8.9 to 9.9, I was able to get down to 3/10. And then, of course, as we get to smaller and smaller ratios, I tried to get as close as possible. Here you can see that we were within 300ths, I guess it's almost 400ths, as far as the ratio goes. But this gives us a really good accurate range, and it makes me feel very confident that the numbers that we are using here are accurate. So this is the rough damage chart that we were able to come up with. And as you can see here, there is a little bit of difference between the chart that FOE has and the chart that I have somewhere on here, one of these things, if I keep clicking around. There's a little bit of difference, but overall, you still see this same pattern. And this bottom one here is also on a logarithmic scale, just so you know. So that basically means that here going from 0 to 1 takes up a lot more space than going from 1 to 20. Okay, so once we understand how the damage range works, then we can start saying, hey, we want to be within specific tiers of that damage range because that is optimal. We want to be in one-shot kill range. We want to be in one-shot kill if you get your AO to go off range. We want to be in a range where it's a guaranteed two-shot kill, things like that. So here is my chart. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit for you. And obviously I'll link to this. Here is my damage chart. Ignore this one over here off to the side. I'll probably block that out in the actual video. And when I say the floor and the ceiling and then the damage ranges, this is basically for planning. So what I mean by that is that if the floor is, say, 9.3, what that means is that you want to have at least 9.324 as your damage ratio, like your attack divided by their defense, in order to be in the 9 to 10 range. Or you want to be at least 2.284 in order to be in the 7 to 8 range. Now, the ceiling works the opposite way. And what that basically means is that is the highest range, the highest ratio that you can go to before it cuts over to the next damage tier. So say that you were attempting and that you really wanted to be in a range such that you had to get hit 4 times and before your unit would die. That means that you would want to be in this 1 to 3 range. The highest ratio that you could be at would be 0.431. Okay, so I realize that there's a bunch of crazy nerdy numbers, and you can skip to the next part because this tool is going to make all of this way easier. All right, so that's what these ranges are. Now, I've color-coded these ranges to reflect some of the more important cutovers, because in reality, the difference between 8.9 and 9.9 is basically nothing. And really, even for that matter, the difference between 7.8 and 9.9 is really non-existent, because at the end of the day, in both of those cases, you have to hit the enemy unit twice, or you have to have your AO go off in order to get a one-shot kill, or you have to have the space age double damage, whatever you want to call it, go off in order to get a one-hit kill in that range. So that's why I grouped some of these together the way that they did, and that's also because that's when you'll notice the most difference in your attack and defense change. So then I kind of went crazy. And actually, before I get too crazy, I shared some of this information on my Discord server with some of the other players, and Hawkery is actually the player who introduced me to the FOE tips calculations, and he took some of my numbers and put together this cool calculator where you can select your unit and then whatever that unit is, and then you can set your attack boost, whatever that might be, and then you pick the attrition that you're fighting at, and it will tell you what your base attack is, what your defense is. Basically, it does all the calculations for you. But for me, the challenge with this, and he also obviously pointed out a lot of the same cutovers that I pointed out. Now, the challenge for me with this is that when I was looking at this, I wasn't being able to just look at a quick glance and tell how much it was going to help and if I added some amount of defense or attack or changed things, what that actually meant. And that's where that whole color coding comes in. So I took this and I took it to kind of a different stage. So here we have the ability to select the age of the units that you're going to be fighting with, and it will automatically populate with the attack and defense and whatever it is that you have. And again, I give credit to Hockery on part of this because I used some of his data for the units, and I also learned how to do VLOOKUPs using his spreadsheet as an example. And then you pick your enemy units, and this will also automatically populate. Here you put your current attack, whatever that might be, and then the current defense that you have. And then if you are looking at adding, like say for an event, you know that you're going to add 50 attack or 50 defense or whatever it is, that will tell you what your after attack or defense is. Now, all this other stuff you can actually hide. It's not necessary. Obviously, it's there so that you can see the calculations and so that you can check the math and see what's going on. And it was necessary for my calculations. But for the intents and purposes of using this, you actually will not need to see these values. They don't actually tell you what you need to know. So I'm going to hide these away to make this easier to look at. All right, so now that these are all hidden away, we have a much more simple thing to look at. And before I go on, I will also remind you that you'll not be able to edit my spreadsheet, but what you can do is you can go to File and then go to either Download, or you can make a copy, and that's how you can edit this and test your numbers. So we'll go ahead and add whatever it is, 250, and then over here we'll add 200 so that we're kind of getting into the range. And then you set the attrition amount that you're fighting to. And see here at 25, you see that from a defense standpoint, we are still strong. I have, again, the color coding over here on the side. So we're still in the 4-shot kill range. Our defense at this amount is very good. We're not going to be taking a lot of damage. And then you can kind of go up the range of attrition and start to see that at, say, given the attack and defense that I have listed there, around 35, we start to see a little bit of a noticeable defense. We start taking some damage, but it's not really until 40 that there is actually a big difference, right? Here at 40, you can actually see that there is a noticeable visual difference in the amount of damage that you're taking if you have 800 defense versus 1,000 defense, right? And then move on up to, say, 45. Now you're starting to see a major difference starting to appear, not only in how much damage that you're taking, but also how much damage that you're doing, okay? And this is where you will get to make the decision of where do you want to add? Do you want to add more to your defense, or do you want to add more to your attack? This also shows that there is benefit of continuing to add attack even once you have a really high attack number, continue to add defense, because you're not necessarily just looking at being able to increase the max attrition that you can fight to, but you're also looking at how fast you can fight. And what I mean by that is this person here with this attack stats on the left is going to be fighting slower than this person over here on the right, which means that they're going to be able to get more attacks in at this attrition. It gives you a wider range. So even if you have lots of siege camp support, say you have to hit a 3 siege camp sector and you burn up all your attrition for the day, well, then you're shot. So when those 4 siege camp sectors come up or 5 siege camp sectors come up, you're out of luck. Well, when you have all of this extra attack and defense, that means that you're able to continue to fight quickly, even at a much higher range. So with all of that said, I went ahead and did some other fun stuff, and I'm going to hide this and then show you the last bit of craziness for this spreadsheet. So the last thing I did is a little bit different. Oh, I do need to explain how to read this real quick. So for the attacking, our units are on the left and the enemy units are across the top. For defense, the enemy units are on the left and our units are across the top. So if I am using, say, power dragons, then I can see how much damage that I would be doing. So like, for example, I can see that if I go from 800 defense to 1,000 defense, that means that at 45 attrition, power dragons will do a lot less damage to me than they would at say 800 defense. Does that make sense? And then same thing here with like the energy cannons. We see that by adding that extra defense, it makes it so that Steel Fist are doing a lot less damage, and so on. Yes. And actually, in this case, even for the energy cannon, adding that extra defense would make it so that power dragons are actually doing less damage as well, which if you are fighting in Space Age Venus, you know that these are some of the common matchups that you deal with. And you can also, if you are trying to check for how far you can fight in, say, GE or in GVG, for GVG, 13 attrition is about the same as 50 support, and 17 attrition is the same as 75%. So that can also give you some ideas if you're trying to look at the GVG numbers for yourself. All right, so on to the last bit of craziness. So, and I took a lot of this stuff here from Hawkery, and one of the things that was different is that with Hawkery, what he does is he shows you the range that you need to be in. Here, I'm going to change this real quick. All right, so he says, all right, in order to do 10 to 10, one hit guaranteed, you would need to be at 3,400 attack percentage, or to be in the one hit range, you would need to be at 1773. Now this is at whatever attrition, 12 attrition. So, and that's power dragon against power dragon and so on. So that's cool and that's neat and it's helpful, but I want to be able to see a bigger range of things. I want to be able to see trends and what it looks like if I change, how much does that change my attrition? How much further can I fight effectively? And that's what I attempt to accomplish here with these two charts. So here what we'll do is we will find the unit that we want to fight with. In this case, I actually selected a rapid fire cannon, and I'm comparing the attack. I'm actually comparing the attack of enemy that we are fighting against currently, and then compared to my attack to kind of show the difference between what that looks like. And then each of these lines shows you a cutover, and then these diagonal lines that kind of go from left to right, those show you where you are on the damage scale, on the damage ratio. So, for example, your damage ratio, this blue one right here, that matches up with this 500 attack boost, 500 defense boost, okay? And then this red one here across the top, that matches up with my 1650 attack and my 1043 defense. And what you see is that based off of that, I can fight all the way up to, we'll say, I mean, it really doesn't even matter where you want to look at it, but my fighting at 75 attrition is comparable to that person's fighting at 37 attrition. It's a really big difference, right? And then now with defense, you definitely want to be under the line, as I may have already stated. And the one thing to notice here, again, this is also a log scale, meaning that you have going from 0 to 1 doesn't take up much space, but going from 1 to 10 it occurs at a much faster pace. And what you'll see here is, again, the difference between fighting at, say, 8 attrition, it's 2 shots, versus 34 attrition, and then up here into the 100% 2 shot, right? So this line down here means that there is a chance that you're going to get 2 shot. It's not guaranteed you're going to get 2 shot, but there's a chance you're going to get 2 shot. This line up here means that the enemy has a 100% chance of 2-shotting you, and if they have the AR targeting or whatever space age nonsense double damage they have, then that is a guaranteed 1-hit kill if they have that. So up here, right, you see they can go up to 77 attrition for that, whereas I can go up to 111 attrition, right? So it's just a really, really big difference. And this is really helpful for letting you figure out if you're going, say, from 800 and 500 to, we'll call it 1100 and 750, right? That's a pretty reasonable range of change to make. And you can see here how much further that lets you fight on the damage scale and on the defense scale. All right, last thing to mention is that how damaged your unit is does affect how much damage you do, and vice versa. And that is one reason why I tend to favor having a slightly higher damage ratio versus defense ratio, because when you attack and damage the unit, that means that their counterattack will do less damage to you. So you don't need to have as high of a defense in order to be protected. I just prefer a much more aggressive approach. Plus, if you're being able to one-shot units more reliably, whether it's through your Arctic Orangery or whether it's through your Space Age unit getting double damage, or whether you're just in the 9 to 10 range and you're just getting one-shot kills, right? No matter which way you look at it, that benefits you more because they never get a chance to even attack you, okay? And that's why I personally always will stack slightly more attack than defense. Now, I don't know if my ratio of what is currently about 1.6 to 1 is right on, kind of like that 3 to 2 type of range, or 150%. I don't know, however you want to look at it. That range has been working really well for me. I had originally started at kind of a 2 to 1 ratio, and I definitely have noticed that I have more success closer to a 3 to 2 instead of a 2 to 1. If you've stuck with me this long, I appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.